I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Today we have Chris Sacca on the show. This is one I've been really looking forward to, and it was one of those people that I reached out and said, hey, will you come on the show? And when he said yes, it was just like this feeling of accomplishment. Chris is one of the individuals that I place into this coveted private Twitter list that I call WISE. And I just try to learn as much as I possibly can. Chris is a billionaire. He is self-made. He is an investor. And he has quite the windy path and journey. Former Google employee, early Google employee, and he took a different route though. He has been able to spot investments in companies like Twitter, Uber, and many others early on, way before they hit the radar. And he's done quite well, running the most successful venture capital firm ever, according to many experts and analysts. He's able to just spot things early, but also his wisdom. It's quite fascinating. He's also on the Shark Tank, so you may have seen him as a guest on the Shark Tank. He's the one wearing the crazy cowboy shirt, and he'll stand up against Cuban every once in a while too. So take a listen. This was such a joy, and I had so many questions for Chris. We probably only got to a third of them, so I'm hoping he'll come back on the show, and I'll see you on the flip side. Oh yeah, and also on the flip side, I will share my own why not now, something I've been waiting and holding off on sharing until now, because I knew as soon as I said it more publicly and put it out there, then I would be 100% accountable. So I look forward to saying this one out loud. Being able to design my own day and do it in the most efficient way is a non-negotiable for me. I'm a bit of a time management nerd, so when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and effective to get the most out of my day, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and it's called Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized professionally and personally. And my to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. We are in lockstep. Monday.com is like having a brand new operating system. Everything has its own home, deadline. You can see the team members associated with the tasks, and it's color coordinated, so you can easily navigate your own task list. We all have multifaceted jobs, businesses, and lives. With Monday, you're able to keep all of these components organized in their own compartments, but you're also one click away from seeing the big picture and how they all integrate together. Creating systems and procedures within your day and business saves a lot of time. For example, my team and I have a dedicated Monday.com board for this very podcast. Did you know that there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast ready for air? It's the same exact process every single time. And it's a system that we have put into place. So we know the various key steps are assigned to certain people, and we've mapped out the entire process from start to finish within this one board. This allows us to be streamlined. It cuts back on the amount of emails exchanged as well as the amount of meetings needed. One feature I love is that my social media content calendar is built inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, I like, and it's embedded into my overall calendar as well. Another feature we use every single day is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer, which is extremely distracting and inefficient. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin to start your free trial today. That's hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin. Chris Sacca, welcome to the Why Not Now show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, why not now?
Why not now? You're already into it. I like this. So let's hop right in.
Podcast is going pretty well for you. You've got some pretty killer guests already.
Oh, thank you. Like yourself, I'm pretty jazzed about it. It's been a blast. And one of the best parts is seeing on social and emails come through and people talking about their own why not now moments and how they're tackling them. So that's extremely cool to see that feedback loop.
Yeah. Did I see Mark Cuban has done this podcast?
Yes, he has.
You know my relationship with Mark Cuban. I can't let him have the last word in anything. And so that was a serious driver from why I'm here. I got to clean up the mess he left.
There you go. We can tackle that. I have a couple of questions around that relationship a little bit. And you're already off to a good start because Mark rolls up to the interview at a pool in Vegas. So you can imagine the audio and the editing that we had to do around that background noise. So thank you for being a pro.
Pool, he was?
Yeah, he was at a pool and people were coming up to him and he's my first guest out of the gate when we launched. So I was just like, it's Cuban. Like, there's not much I could do. Say, hey.
Classic Mark Cuban bringing his A game, giving you a lot of personal attention. I love it.
Yeah, he was great though. It was quite funny to hear some of the fans roll up to him wherever. I just envision him, sitting at the pool, people coming up to him.
Yeah, the most invisible I've ever felt in my life is being out in public with Mark. I mean, it's funny, since doing TV and actually from podcasts, believe it or not, a lot of people know me from startup podcasts. And so I get people, who come up, a lot of young people who watch Shark Tank, who want selfies and stuff. But if I'm walking around with Mark Cuban, it's literally like I don't exist. We just had to film a segment for Shark Tank down in Alabama at an Auburn University football game. And I joked like, hey, at one point I could literally just take my pants off and nobody here would see it. And that was like a running joke for a while. And then at one point we were done shooting and I needed to change into clothes to go into the football game. I had to get out of my super hot cowboy shirt and into Auburn fan clothes. And I actually did it. I literally just changed my entire outfit there in the parking lot of the football game and no one noticed because Mark Cuban was standing 5 feet away from me.
Well, in some ways, it could be a nice decoy for you. So
it was amazing. A total camera. Yeah, fly under the radar with that guy.
I would like to hear about a moment when you had to ask yourself, why not now? And not just skim over this, but get down into the nitty gritty. Talk about that day. Talk about that time. How you were feeling, and let's zoom in on it.
There's been a bunch of those times. I think basically my life and my career are hallmarked by some really pivotal moments that frankly ended up being not something I'd milled on for a long time, but just kind of pulled the trigger and wrote it out. But one of those in particular was when I decided to quit Google. The year was 2007. I just wrapped 4 years at Google, and so I invested into my original stock grant, which wasn't very much compared to most Googlers. I was worth less than $1 million, which is an insane amount of money for everyone in the whole world except for someone who was at Google, because when I got there, I was kind of a junior person and had risen through the ranks. And so what they'd done is they'd stacked a bunch of money in front of me, a bunch of new stock options that I would vest into over time if I stuck around. And I had the most amazing job. I worked in this role where I got to do kind of anything I wanted there. I got to start any new divisions I wanted, and I did. I started a big Spectrum division and Wi-Fi division and worked on location-based stuff. I got to work on mergers and acquisitions. I got to solve problems for Eric Schmidt, our CEO, and Larry and Sergey, our co-founders. I got to travel a ton, do a ton of public speaking. I literally had the greatest job in the world. And the reason I know I had the greatest job in the world is about a week after I quit, I was sitting at my parents' house in upstate New York for the holidays, and I literally read a New York Times article, and the New York Times article said, "Why would Chris Sacca quit the greatest job in the world?" And I sat there and kind of cried. I was like, "Oh no, what have I done?" I was totally freaked out, but it turned out to be one of the most important and valuable and rewarding decisions I ever made. And part of that was because despite having, I think what on paper looked like the greatest job in the world, the reality was Google started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, we talk often about the transition from being a startup to a big company and the politics that come with that and the hierarchy that comes with that. And Google resisted it longer than anyone I know, than any other company I know. I mean, even when there are thousands of employees there, they built stuff. Shona Brown, who is an unsung hero, she was one of the topic for a long time, built these communication systems where we all in the company kept each other apprised of what was going on all the time. And so it felt like a startup, meaning every week we would type snippets, 5 things we did this week, 5 things we're going to accomplish next week. And you hit publish on those, and they were shared with everybody in the company who wanted to see them. You'd publish OKRs. OKRs were your objectives and key results for the quarter, what you personally were going to do that quarter, and then you'd score yourself at the end of the quarter on how you did, and then you'd set new goals. And those are available to everyone in the company. We all had internal resumes, which were kind of amazing. Next to our names, we had not just the resume we used to apply to work at the company, which is always cool to still have that for all your coworkers, know what their background was and what their skills were. But we kept internal resumes of what we accomplished while we worked there. And so you kind of knew, hey, is this person getting cool stuff done? What are their skills? What are their interests? What have they been working on? Maybe I should recruit them to come work on my project. We had project requirements documents and notes from every meeting that were shared. At the end of the meeting, the notes were not a secretarial function, but they were a really important way of sharing knowledge. And so there was all this stuff there that kept that company feeling small for the longest time. And yet, in the end, by 2007, I would find myself in meetings where the first question is people would ask, "What are you doing in this meeting?" Rather than for years, it's like, "Oh, cool, you're here. We can help. We have extra, that way we have extra minds and bodies on the job." Instead, people felt really threatened by someone from outside their territory. There was one particular moment for me where a young woman who worked on my team, I think she was literally 22, first job out of Stanford, had gone and without any permission at all, had flown to Ontario and convinced Research in Motion, the company that ran BlackBerry, to install Google Talk on all of their handsets for free. They weren't going to charge us any money. That's normally the kind of deal where you as a software application company would pay them to install that. And remember, this is back in the days before you could just go download a bunch of apps. Your apps were basically whatever your device manufacturer, your carrier put on that phone for you. And so she flew to Ontario and she did this deal. She submitted it to legal review really quickly. They said, "Yep, it's legit." They made a couple of changes to the paperwork, all good. And then she came back and showed us, and we were like, holy cow, this is a product. Google Talk was a product that really needed distribution help. It's a competitor to Skype. We tried to buy Skype back then and couldn't get the deal done. And so instead we decided to build a competitor. And so this thing needed help. And so she went and got that done with just total initiative. And so I went and sent a note to the senior management team. And by then my visibility was higher and I was considered an executive. And I sent a note to the senior management team saying, hey, everyone, congratulations to Mary Himmencool. I'll shout her out. She still works at Google today and she runs one of their entrepreneurship programs there. So congratulations to Mary Himmencool. Total hustle. Just went up there, found her way into Research in Motion, sat down with one of the co-CEOs, convinced them to do this deal. Holy cow, this is what Google stands for. It's amazing. And all these notes from Eric, Larry, and Sergey started going around like, the Atta Girl notes, like, hey, all right on. Glad that's still happening in 2007 kind of stuff. And then one executive who I won't call out chimed in and said, whoa. That's supposed to be my team's deal. And, because it got done outside of our team, we're going to invalidate it. So we need to tear that up. And poor Mary is like, wait, what? Can we all agree that what we did was pro Google? We moved the ball forward. We went through the proper channels of getting legal to review it. So it's a legit deal. But literally the mobile team tore that deal up and it never got done again. And so it was one of those moments where I just said, as a company gets bigger, people start defining themselves by their territory and their job title more than their actual contribution or the overall health of the company. And that was a breaking point for me. My skills are generalist. I'm not really a specialist. I'm pretty good at a lot of things and not amazing at any particular things. And so in those early days, I was able to float and be helpful in many, many different capacities. I could be some glue that would bind together different disparate parts of the company that didn't know each other and help them communicate and collaborate. And I could get stuff started. I'm a starter. But as I started to see the politics and the territory getting in the way of the overall health of the company, that's when it started to break for me. And in parallel, I'd already made 2 startup investments. I invested in PhotoBucket, was my first one, and I didn't really have the money, so I wrote it on 2 credit card checks. And by then, that was doing really well. And then I'd also invested in Twitter. And it wasn't clear at the time that Twitter was going to be this globally dominant media platform. But it was obvious that we had something special in our hands. And the time I would spend hanging out at their office, either before Google or after Google or on weekends, I felt alive. I felt like we were working just expressly on product and thinking about users and thinking about the future and not thinking about what, I think people often refer to as TPS reports and the politics of cost center something fell into. And that was invigorating. And so there I was right around just after Thanksgiving of 2007. And I said, I'm going to leave. And a couple of my friends even said, hey, look, you've been here 4 years. You now get a sabbatical. You get to get paid for 2 months of not working. Like, go take your sabbatical. And I could have used the money. That was just free money and free vested. And yet it just occurred to me. I was like, I really just want to move on. This is great, but I want to get back into startups. And so I walked in and let Larry and Sergey know that my last day would be in a couple weeks. And they were super cool about it. They threw me a big party and I left there with a bunch of friends and consider myself a really proud alum of Google. I'm very grateful for everything I learned there, and I still believe deeply in that company. But I just suddenly found myself outside of Google with, again, more money than almost, every person on the planet. But at less than $1 million, that's not the kind of money you need to get into angel investing. I didn't know any outside investors. I didn't have a plan to be a venture capitalist. I wasn't even really sure what I was going to do. I just knew I needed to pull the trigger and do something different and smaller and more entrepreneurial, something over which I had more control over my own destiny and no politics, and where I would define my own fate.
Which is pretty incredible, especially I recently learned that you only have, 3 full-time people at Lowercase?
I think we just hired a 4th. We hired a guy out of college to help us out.
Okay, which is still
I think we're
mind-blowing thinking about the amount of deals, the amount of just exposure and progress, success you've had. and knowing it's still so lean, and that's probably in good part why you've done so well. But there's over the last week or so, I've had 4 people, friends, just basically friends, who have, for one reason or another, decided to leave the corporate world. Sometimes a few of them were kind of pushed to leave, and some of them have decided. But over the last couple of years, this has been a huge trend, especially with a lot of people that I went to college with or that I've worked with in the past. And knowing what you know in the visibility that you have into startups and progressive young companies that really do almost have to have an attractive culture in order to attract talent, what's probably the number one thought or piece of advice you would give to a big corporate company right now when it comes to culture?
First of all, I just want to say I have been pushed out of a company before too. I was pushed out of a law firm, so I certainly know what that was like. 4 days before September 11th, I got laid off from Fenwick and West, along with a bunch of my other law school kind of hiring classmates so they could make room for the new incoming class. And so I certainly know what it's like to be on that end of the equation.
Was that what launched Salinger?
It was. There was a gap year. So yeah,
Okay.
I mean, to go back and fill that in. So I owe a ton of money in my own name, both student loans and some day trading losses because I made some really risky trades. I took a job as a lawyer. I was starting to pay it back by basically working as a lawyer during the day and taking on side projects at night to pay back all this money I owed. And then I got laid off. And for about 4 days, I had great job prospects. My old clients really liked me. They were going to bring me onto the business side in their companies. And then September 11th happened. And by no means do I want to ever compare the tragedy in New York to the inconveniences that befell us in Silicon Valley. But that day basically ended the optimism that there might be a recovery in tech. And so again, the suffering doesn't even begin to compare with what was actually happening to everyone in New York. But that was the beginning of the end for tech for the next few years. You literally couldn't get a U-Haul trailer out of San Francisco because they had all gone one way and not come back.
Oh,
I mean, it was so bleak back then. And so I started banging around Silicon Valley trying to find anything to do, and I had a business card that said Chris Sacca, and nobody would hire me. And they'd say stuff like, "You sound like a good kid. You'll find something will come through for you." And I was good at the hustle. I was good at getting myself into the meetings. I would often sneak into the back of the networking events through the kitchen because I spoke Spanish, and I'd get in there and look people in the eye and go in with a firm handshake and pitch. And, and I graduated near the top of my class at Georgetown Law School. I had good credentials. I could talk. I had skills, but it was just so dead. It was bleak. At one point I sent over 700 out without hearing a response back. And so, eventually I decided to rebrand. And so I created a thing called the Salinger Group, which was basically me, but I just had a website. I let the domain lapse a long time ago by accident, but you can go see it at the Wayback Machine, archive.org. It's still there. You'll see it says a lot of nothing. And I came up with a business card that my now wife, then best friend, designed for me. And it was pretty cool and flashy, but it said nothing. And I called myself a principal at the Salinger Group. And it was amazing how that changed the conversation with people I was networking with.
Your Mrs. rebranding, but pre-cowboy shirt days, right? So that was a reinvention again.
Well, the cowboy brand, we'll get to the cowboy. That wasn't even really a conscious branding thing. That just kind of happened. That was a very intentional, hey, I need to get people to give me a fresh look and think that there's more to me than they're seeing. And so I would walk up to people, same kind of events. Literally, I was at the Indus Entrepreneurs had huge gatherings, and the Chinese Software Professionals of America, or the Chinese Software Professionals Association, and the World Internet Forum, and the Foresight Institute. I had a calendar of these things weekly, and I would just go to all of them. I would walk up now with this business card that said the Salinger Group, and people were like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. You guys do good work. Hey, why don't you help us on this thing?" And before you know it, I had this robust consulting practice doing some legal, some business advice. I was writing business plans. I was helping companies rename and rebrand. I even it was amazing how much work I had on my plate suddenly. And I'll say as a footnote to that, as the Salinger Group kind of continued on and became successful, and as it looked like there might be light at the end of the tunnel for this economy, a bunch of my friends who had also been laid off, either, whether it's from law firm jobs or other places in the economy, had all asked, hey, do you mind if I fill in the gap in my resume with just saying I worked at the Salinger Group? And I was like, yep, knock yourself out. I can give you an email address and you can say you did whatever you wanted. And so there are a bunch of proud Salinger Group alumni out there in the world working in your company right now. You never know.
I think I was actually one of them at some point, and you should have a reunion at some point too. How fun would that be? Give out some awards. I did read or heard, I can't remember which, that you started shifting your vernacular from I to we. So you started saying, we versus I more, and that was a part of the shift. That sounds very intentional. And what sparked that?
It was very intentional then, but I do it today still. I think one of the things that's interesting about our fund, because I do have partners, but even before I did, when it was just me and Serena, our COO, just two of us, I said our because one of the things I found was, as successful as I was right out of the gate, and as strong as my reputation in the industry was, I was still pretty easy to F with. Other funds and other partners found it easy to talk trash about me and push me out of deals. And because I didn't have a big office on Sand Hill Road, I wasn't a long-term venerable institution, I didn't have a gang of like 12 white dudes who would be offended by you defaming me. And so I realized that while I didn't want to bring on a bunch of people and create overhead and waste a ton of time, I wanted to keep it all about just doing the deals and supporting the companies. At the same time, what I thought was an advantage by being small was really sometimes a liability in terms of the competitive positioning. This goes for startups too. It was really interesting. In the early days, I had this startup called FanBridge that I'm still deeply invested in. I love these guys, and they've spun out another company there, and they're doing particularly well. But they were three guys, two founders in the US, and their CTO was in Argentina. They were originally in the email business. So they were managing email lists for bands and fans and corporations. They were sending hundreds of millions to billions of emails a month. And as I went to go help them raise money from other angels and small VCs, I remember pointing out how awesome it was that, and can you believe these guys, they've accomplished all this with just three people. And so for what for me resonated as an incredible testament to the power and efficiency of just a few guys, I started to realize made them sound rinky-dink and fly-by-night and not as impressive. And we see this happen in startups all the time. Like, companies raise a ton of money, bring on more and more headcount. They actually slow down their innovation, but it sounds more legit and they sound like they have more gravitas. And so I was trying to balance that. How do I give people comfort that our firm is big enough and getting all the work done and doing all the compliance, and yet at the same time be small enough that, we don't ever have to say to an entrepreneur like, hey, that's a great deal. Wait till my next partner meeting and I pitch it to all 12 people in my partnership and then I can get back to you on that. I always wanted to be in a position to say, I love the deal and we're going to do it right now. Let's shake hands. We always got asks from our investors, our limited partners who invest in our fund, hey, when's your big LP meeting, your annual LP meeting? And most funds have those. They're really luxurious, garish affairs where they rent a resort somewhere and they fly in all their investors and they entertain everybody and pour good wine and do some team building events and bring in some of their best founders and entrepreneurs to give presentations. And it's a hobnobbing. But it not only costs money, but it takes a lot of time and effort to put that stuff together. And you have to have, event managers who do that and stuff. And so we used to just say to our LPs, like, we're never going to have one of those because I don't want to have to staff up and create more overhead just to do that. Like, if you want to catch up, swing by where I am, come to Truckee up in the mountains, and we'll hang out and we'll talk about it.
What did you call it? The pub tub? Is that where?
The jam tub.
The jam tub. That's right.
Travis named it the jam tub, the hot tub where we spend way too much time. He spends way too much time. he could spend hours and hours there, like more than humanly possible. But, you know, we didn't even have swag. Like, we literally didn't have lowercase the logo on anything but our website until, I guess, like 2 years ago. A guy named Jamie Lindsay, he was a Twitter fan who has since become a real friend. I love him. Jamie was just like, this is goddamn embarrassing. And so he just went and made a bunch of swag for us and just mailed it to me. I was like, I think he heard me complaining about no swag at some point. And so he made a bunch of t-shirts, some backpacks, some travel shaving kits, etc. I mean, it's amazing. I wear it all the time. We've since gotten our act together a little bit and made some swag, but we just were the least overhead. I mean, by the way, here's a related point, and when it comes to the leanness of our organization. So Shark Tank asks, you've seen Shark Tank, you see at the beginning where they're like a baller, right? Mm-hmm. So they show Cuban standing next to his plane and holding his Dallas Mavericks championship trophy and just looking so baller. And there's Damon in his amazing offices and his fancy car, and there's Robert in front of his 50,000 square foot house and his array of sports cars. And then at his big company headquarters, you see Kevin on his boat and drinking fine wine and opening the NASDAQ. And Lori is there on some mega yacht in Newport Harbor. And, you know, Barbara, I don't want to leave out Barbara. She's the real estate queen of New York and up in some sky rises shaking hands on deals. And so they came time to shoot my package, and they're like, all right, Chris, we need you to look baller. So let's go shoot in front of your plane. I'm like, plane? I don't own a plane. Like, I fly private sometimes, but owning a plane, like, the economics on that make no sense. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, what about all your sports cars? I'm like, sports cars? I'm like, Uber kicks ass. How would you have any cars? I'm like, I have a Tesla. It's awesome, but just standing in front of one Tesla is not going to impress anybody. And they're like, what about your house? I'm like, my house in Truckee is a 3-bedroom. It's still the house I lived in before I raised my fund and had all the success. I'm like, it's going to look like a cottage and it's not going to blow anybody's mind. And they're like, well, what do we do? What about your boat? I'm like, a boat? Oh my God, I would never own a boat. And so they really struggle. Let's just shoot this whole thing in your offices. You know, we'll use your big meeting rooms and stuff. I was like, I don't think you guys understand. I've told you, but we don't have a corporate headquarters. And they're like, there's nowhere that even just says lowercase capital on the wall. I'm like, nope. We all work from home or out on the road if we're traveling. And if we need to do a meeting, we borrow offices that belong to our portfolio companies. I love it. And these guys shook their heads. They're like, how are we going to convince America that you're a baller, that you're rich and successful? You don't have any of the trappings of actually being successful. And so in the end, we shot that. For those of you who are in San Francisco, you might recognize the first part where we're all clinking wine glasses. Was shot around 8:39 in the morning on the roof of the Battery, like a little Soho House type club in San Francisco. And the second part that is made to look like a lowercase conference room, because they literally put the lowercase logo on a projector behind me, is actually the offices of HeavyBit, an incubator for hardcore tech companies in San Francisco that we're an investor in and friends with. And so I literally borrowed 2 places to pretend like I have a space big enough to convene anyone.
That's so funny. You should have said, I'm a virtual baller. You can just find me online. That's where I have my presence. But it's also a kind of a shift, I'm sure, in just what you find valuable and where you spend your time and what you find interesting and things like that. But kind of going back to staying small, it just occurred to me that there's probably a correlation between why not now and that question that we ask ourselves and our ability to ask it and the answer to the amount of people that work for us or the amount of geographic anchors or the size of company if this were applied to a company. So I'm just envisioning kind of this graph, and you're more likely to be able to act on your why not now if you stay small and you stay the agile, not necessarily scrappy, but you can still be agile and operate like a cruise ship but maneuver like a speedboat type of mentality.
Sure. I mean, look, it's not widely known, but a couple years ago I stepped back from the day-to-day at Lowercase. I I gave the fund to my partner, Matt Mazzio, who's 10 years younger than I am and incredibly talented. I think most traditional firms would have hey, if you join and you keep your head down for 10 years and you grind it out, maybe someday we'll recognize you as a junior partner. And after a couple of years, Crystal and I, who were my wife, Crystal, who's also a partner in our fund, we were really comfortable that Matt was the guy, and we gave it to him. And that was another kind of why not now in a little way. It was, we had this incredible asset. When you start doing well in venture capital and repeatedly returning money to investors, and we've got, not just probably the most successful venture fund of all time, but probably number 4 and 5 on the all as well. And so we've just been cranking money back out for investors, and there's so much momentum there. It's just easy to rest, invest, cash in on that, and just keep raising more money and live off the fees. And so as hard as it was in the beginning to get started, it's really, really easy to keep it going now. And yet Crystal and I walked away from that. And that was another one of those moments that, there's no one else telling you to do that. 0 people are rooting for you to stop doing what you're doing and giving you the advice that it's time. And so, and again, this isn't something we agonized over for 6 months. I think it just took kind of a week or two of walking through the woods and talking about it and saying, we did that. It's great. We were really good at it. We made everyone who bet on us a lot of money. We're super proud of the companies we backed. And there's other stuff we want to do now. And so we basically gave away our fund.
Is that when you moved to Montana? And was this the time, or was it Montana, or was it maybe Tahoe that you decided you wanted to kind of go on the offensive? And
yeah, so that happened way back at the beginning. So
okay.
When I left Google in 2007, I was one of the public faces of Google. So if you want to get in touch with Google, you would probably pitch me. My email address was very public. I was out there giving the speeches that Eric Schmidt was turning down. And so when I left, that torrent of inbound didn't stop. It might have even accelerated, frankly, because it was double like, hey, we can still go through him to get to Google. And by the way, here's a guy who's starting to invest in startups. So, and the investing market wasn't as crowded back then. There weren't as many angels and super angels or small micro funds or whatever you call it. So I was getting a lot. And what I found was I was just going to coffees all day. I was taking pitch after pitch after pitch. And by the end of the day, I would have enjoyed the conversations and felt like I was helpful to everyone that was meeting with me. But by the end of the day, I lost my voice and wasn't getting anything done that was on my to-do list. I was just responding to inbound all the time. And so I kind of got fed up with that and realized I wasn't going to get anything really important done for me unless I pulled out of that playing defense mode. And so again, in a why not now, I moved to Truckee, California. So that's on the North Shore of Tahoe. Truckee is a tech hub. It is a skiing hub. It's a place with a bunch of kind of middle-class, affordable rental ski houses. And I bought one I could barely afford just around the time of the housing crisis. In fact, I had to shop around to a loan broker, and I got one of those impound loans where they take a bunch of your payments and all the tax fees and stuff up front because they're not convinced you're going to be able to pay it back over time. And I moved to Truckee. And so right then at the beginning of my investing career, I decided to move to Tahoe. I mean, it made no sense really on paper. I wasn't rich. I wasn't powerful. I couldn't command people to come up and meet me there. I did it before it made any sense at all. And yet I think that's why it was really effective. I moved up there with my then girlfriend, now wife, Crystal. And what we did was we got really methodical about how we were going to respond to all of this defense we'd been playing. We said, instead, who do we want to know better? And we started writing lists of people that we wanted to be closer friends with or get to know, even people we hadn't met yet, but we'd heard they were really fascinating. And we wrote out these lists and we would start inviting them up to Tahoe to literally come and stay with us for a few days. We would cook, we would hike, we would ski, we would throw on loud music and dance all night, hang out in the hot tub, and we would jam on idea. We would talk through companies that have since gone on to become, I mean, Travis was a guy who spent a ton of time at that house. And so it wasn't an accident that we were involved from the very earliest where Uber had been incorporated. Garrett Camp is a guy who's spent time up there. David Yulovich at OpenDNS, another one of our big exits. Guys like Matt Mullenweg, Tim Ferriss, Kevin Rose, the guys from Loku, the guys from Lookout, Twilio, these are all relationships that we decided we wanted to go into and really affirmatively build. And Truckee played a huge role in that. And when we would go down to San Francisco, we wouldn't tell anybody. We would sneak in, and instead of doing a bunch of coffees with random people, we would host dinners, or we'd do some really meaningful time with the people that we had chosen. And as a result, I think we came away with great friendships, deep relationships, a really unfair advantage when it came to understanding the companies we were investing in or helping even to start. Evan Williams spent a ton of time in Truckee, for instance. So that was it. Yeah, we went on offense. But again, if you want to talk about a why not now moment, it didn't make any sense at the time. Couldn't afford it, had no real source of income, was basically saying, hey, I'm getting in the investing business by leaving Silicon Valley. And yet, I think it's one of the reasons why we did so well.
So I had heard this story a bit when you interviewed yourself on Tim's podcast, that deal where he has you ask yourself the questions and answer them all on your own. One of those episodes, right? So you had shared this story, and I was going through a pretty big transition myself, and I was living on a boat in San Diego last year. And I had heard this story, and I'd been thinking about doing something similar in that, moving up to the Black Hills in South Dakota. And it was that moment that I heard your story that I thought, exactly, see, I can do this. I am going to go on the offense, and I am going to go learn and build what I want to build and learn. And Chris Sacca did it, so can I. And if he did it, and it turns out that it worked pretty well for him, at least I have those sound bites to defend myself when people say, that's career suicide. Why would you remove yourself so much? You're not close to LA or San Francisco or New York. And so I did it. And here I am sitting in the middle of the forest right now talking to you. And I have to say, I've never been happier, but I feel like my relationships within the industries that I've always kind of played in, but also just my career, and there's been an energy shift. And I don't know if it's going on the offensive or if it's just having more clarity, more time, but it has been incredible. And the reason I bring this up is I've had a couple of people reach out to me and say, thanks for sharing that, which is really thanks to you, because they have been told you need to move to New York or you need to do this. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on geographic anchors, like with the startups that you invest in, with your expertise. How important is it to be in Silicon Valley or in LA or New York or even Austin?
That's a good question. As an investor, as somebody?
As someone that's starting something new, and maybe they aren't even looking for money yet, but just changing their course or wanting to get after their why not now.
It kind of depends on your specific network of talent. So one of the biggest challenges in starting a company isn't necessarily writing the code or building that first prototype. It's attracting the other people to help you get that done. Nobody can do these things on their own, right? And so you need a nexus of talented people to help you. I'll give you an example. I am not a good investor for a company in London. And I've run into this a couple of times where I used to teach master classes at Oxford. I love being over there. It's super fun. There's great entrepreneurs there. And so I'd meet amazing people who were my students, and I would invest in them. And then they would ask for the help, the same kind of help I give to entrepreneurs here in the US. And I just wasn't able to help with a lot of it. They would say, hey, look, we're looking for a new VP of engineering. And I didn't have a stable of candidates the way I would here in the US. They would say, hey, we're looking for a cheaper office space, or we need to expand, so we need to move somewhere else. And I didn't have references to send them on, oh, hey, I heard about this space opening up, the way I would in San Francisco, LA, New York. And so my hands were kind of tied. And so I've ended up focusing my geography as an investor to specific markets where I know I can be specifically helpful to the startup in the ways that I think make my investing unfairly advantageous for me. I'm not throwing darts at a board. I'm picking companies that are already great, but where I know I specifically, or Crystal specifically, or Matt, my partner specifically, can make that company more valuable by some skill or effort that we put in. And we've had to restrict that geographically. Now, that said, we've had startups succeed lots of places. We even had one in North Dakota. But there, I have to get really comfortable that they have all the geographic kind of allure and gravity to solve recruiting and space and the things that are very geographically specific. And then we can still help remotely with product and strategy and fundraising and storytelling and that kind of stuff. So what I would say is to somebody thinking about starting something up is you have to think not just do you have the good idea, have you been able to execute and get something to fruition, have you been able to attract the first one or two people to help you or attract maybe a little bit of funding to get started. But then you have to look around and be honest. Do I have the connections? Do I have the network and the resources and the kind of the brand and the identity in this geographic region in order to attract the next 10 people, 20 people, 50 people to make this thing huge? And that can be really, really hard, but it can happen anywhere. Silicon Valley doesn't have any exclusivity on talent. And in fact, the talent there is getting really, really expensive. It's expensive for people to live there, kind of prohibitive usually for people who aren't executives or engineers. They have to live far away in Silicon Valley. And so we have cool companies all around the country, but I think that's what you need to keep in mind as a founder. Will I be able to succeed in this geography because I have the connections and the network and the resources in hand to get that done?
And that's, yeah, I think thinking through your specific why not now, and if it's startup, if you're starting a company, for sure. If it's not necessarily growing and building a company, but doing something different, that it's just you for a while, it's probably a little bit different. But that's good to hear. So I have so many things that I haven't been able to get to yet, but I also want to be cognizant of your time. Twitter acquisition. We hear all the rumblings. Don't necessarily need you to make your prediction because that's already out there. Not necessarily prediction, but your insight. But I have a question regarding the government. At any point, if you're able to share, was there a serious conversation about Twitter potentially being acquired by the government? Just thinking through the amount of data, the amount of information that could be folded in there. Are you not allowed to talk about it?
No. I mean, no. The government doesn't buy stuff like that. It's interesting. People have reached out recently and said, "What about it becoming a nonprofit? What about buying and operating it like the BBC is because it's such a treasure?" So let me just respond by saying, let's separate Twitter the product, Twitter the business, and Twitter the investment.
Okay.
I think we can all agree that Twitter the product is a beautiful, wonderful, and yet flawed and frustrating thing that is not living up to its full potential. And yet, if you use it, you care about it so deeply. You think it's an incredible cultural force. It's introduced so many of us to other people and voices that really deeply impact us. It's given a lot of us an opportunity to express ourselves in a scale that never before was possible. It amplifies the quietest signals on the planet when they need and deserve amplification. And yet it's hard to use. The hate and abuse are really, really an issue. And so that's Twitter, the product. We all want it to be better, and we care about it. If you use it, you care about it. And by the way, everybody uses it, has opinions about how it could be better. And so that's another reason who cares about it. Twitter, the business, is actually a pretty fine business. It's generating billions of dollars in revenue. That number's growing over time. They've figured out great ways to monetize the service without really knocking users over the head. Their ads have shown to perform pretty well, often better than Facebook ads. Really good ROI. Their video ads are great. And so, and the company on paper loses money, but it's important to say that most of their losses are attributable to what's called stock-based compensation. And so stock-based compensation is where they didn't used to have to do this, but as accounting rules tightened up, they over the last 5-10 years, it's changed from where stock options didn't count against your financials. So so you didn't always get a really accurate perception of the business because the stock options weren't counted there. But now that they are, as each of the employees vests into more and more of their options, then those are counted as expenses of the company because you're compensating those employees. And so those expenses make it look like the company is just lighting money on fire. What in reality is happening is that they're not just burning a bunch of cash. It's just they're transferring ownership with every day that people vest. They're transferring ownership from outside shareholders to employees. And that makes the value of the company, the portion of the company that the outside investors own, less valuable. And so as a result, it looks like a loss. I go to long lengths to point this out, not to defend the company or anything, but I just want to say to those who love the product, when we talk about the business, Twitter is not actually burning up a bunch of cash. It has more than enough cash on hand to operate for, and I forget, somebody did the analysis recently, but it's either decades or centuries. I forget. It's on that scale though. So Twitter, the business, is not going away anytime soon at all. But we'll pivot from that in a discussion of Twitter, the investment. Twitter, the investment, has been a brutal investment for anyone who got involved in the last couple of years. It's a great investment for anyone who got involved from the beginning. I mean,
Sure.
It's not poo-poo the fact that it's a startup that went from zero to billions of dollars in overall value. That's amazing, and it's fun to reflect on. And I don't want that to be taken away from the people who built something that's had so much global impact and is worth billions and millions of dollars. Obviously, the stock is down from its highs. The growth has slowed. They haven't figured out how to grow new users. They haven't shown the ability to improve the product materially. The company has lost a lot of its mojo, and the stock-based compensation is kind of it's diluting the outside investor ownership. And so as a result, it's been a brutal investment. It traded up recently on speculation that somebody's going to buy the company. It doesn't look like anyone's going to buy the company. And so the stock is trading back down again and things look bleak. So if you break it up into those three things, and I think what happens is when people, ask, can the government buy it or can it be a nonprofit, is those three channels all get blurred, and it leads to panic by those of us who care so much about Twitter. And so I'll say the product is great, needs to be a lot better, but we all care about it so much, deservingly so. The business is very healthy, and Twitter is not going away. It's not one of these holy cow, if they don't raise more money by the end of the day or by the end of the week, they're going out of business. They'll be in business for decades. But C, it's not really a great stock to own, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend owning the stock to anybody right now because I think the things that drive the stock price are things that Twitter still hasn't really figured out.
I see. That is the best insight and kind of Twitter product business investment 101, because I was not aware of a lot of that. And I think, it's important for users to kind of understand, no, this isn't going to go away. Yes, the product could be better. Business is still generating. It's more of that investment side of things too. So thank you for that. And real quick on the topic of politics, we don't need to necessarily get into candidates. Totally aware of who you support if anyone follows you, and that's awesome that you're showing your support. Do you feel that the tech community, the tech leaders, are leveraging their voices and influence and even financial support enough when it comes to politics?
So yeah, obviously I'm a big Hillary Clinton supporter, and I'm not just an anti-Trump person, but I'm a very pro Hillary Clinton person, right? And I'm that way for a number of reasons. I do have progressive politics. There's no doubt about it. I feel like the way I was raised, the opportunities I've had along the way give me a strong sense of empathy for what it's like to be in the struggle. I grew up very luckily in a middle-class family of parents who had graduate school educations, and yet We grew up outside of Buffalo in an auto parts community where I saw so many of my friends' parents laid off or have their pensions bankrupted along the way. And so I got a lot of exposure to that. My dad used to be a small town lawyer helping the basically the underserved and underprivileged. And so I got to know a lot of them along the way and always did a lot of volunteer work. I went to Georgetown, where it was a fancy private school and I had to borrow all the money to go there. That was the first time I was ever really exposed to rich folks. But part of the Georgetown education that was amazing was all the opportunity I had to study and live abroad in Latin America and see what it's really like to be on the wrong end of an economy and what it's really like to be struggling and how fortunate so many of us are here. And yet also see what it's like when there's such disparate wealth, when there's such a big gap between rich and poor in an economy. All along the way, as I was raised, my parents made sure we had manual labor jobs. I worked in construction. I've worked in restaurants. I've done prep. I did door-to-door sales. I had my little side entrepreneurial gigs, but I've always had jobs along the way that, again, I think really built a sense of empathy and what it's like to truly work for a living. I mean, your worst day in a startup doesn't compare to your worst day on a construction site or as a shift as a nurse or a firefighter, or in a restaurant or in a farmer's field. And so I mention all that to just say that, I am a product of some of the social aspects of our system. I went to a private university, but I also went to the University of Buffalo at night to get a math degree when I was a kid. I did a year of law school at the University of Buffalo too. So I'm a beneficiary of a state-sponsored education. I'm a beneficiary of, healthcare. I mean, at 22, I found out I had to have 21, I guess I was 22. I found out I had to have heart surgery 8 hours after I went to the doctor and found just out of nowhere I had a heart condition. Like, I'm a huge beneficiary of having access to healthcare. And I think that's led to me being a healthy person who's even alive to talk to today. And so all this informs what I think is a real duty we have to each other to have a social safety net. I think those of us who've been fortunate, which just as much as we like to tell stories of hustle and grind and taking risk and why not now, that kind of stuff, we really are beneficiaries of everything that's been put in place for us to succeed. And no one does it alone. And we have a responsibility to pay that back and help take care of those who haven't been as fortunate. Whether they're people who, failed at their own entrepreneurial efforts or just people who grew up poor, person of color, women, people who don't have access to the internet, people who don't have access to food, in the basically the food deserts where there are no grocery stores, people who don't have access to healthcare. It's really, really important that we look out for those kinds of people. So that's one hat. A second hat is as a technologist. There's only one candidate who's actually spent the time to listen to the technology community and build a real platform. You can go look at it at hillaryclinton.com. It's about broadband access expansion, which I think is not just pro-tech, but it's basically pro-citizenry at this point. Everyone should have a right to be on broadband internet, just like they have a right to water. And it's about expanding cellular networks and making them more robust. It's about some aspects of net neutrality. It's about STEM education, making sure we really feed the pipeline of next generation of entrepreneurs, particularly in communities of color and among women in these programs. And so we have a presidential candidate here, and she's listened intently to the community and understands what's important to tech and has made that her official platform. Another hat I have is as a business person. There's only one candidate right now who, if she's elected, the markets won't implode, interest rates won't skyrocket, the transparency and the predictability of our capital markets will stay stable enough that this will still be the beacon for international economic freedom and investment. One of the reasons why people come here to build their startups is that we have the easiest and clearest, most reliable access to capital. If another country gets ahead of us on that, they will be the place where the next big companies are built. And we can't have that. And as an investor, I want to really staunchly defend our market and our country's leadership in that role. I also, she's also the only candidate who's recognized that immigration is a net benefit to our economy, not just on the high end, bringing in the engineers who actually power our companies and the entrepreneurs who build these companies, but among the labor class, it's been shown that that immigrants don't actually cost our economy; they pay into our economy and create economic growth. And so whether you look at it as, look, I am a liberal and I do believe we have a social obligation to look out for other people, or I'm a technologist and I like the candidate who's actually spent the time to understand technology and how to move a tech agenda forward, or just as a greedy business person who wants to see the business thrive, whether it's small business who depend upon lower interest rates for financing their business, or big business who need bigger capital markets in the IPO window to stay open. There's really only one candidate in this race. And that's why, to go back to your question about the tech community and what role they've been playing, I think I've never seen anything unified, not just the tech community, but the business community as much as Hillary Clinton has. I mean, it's fascinating. I've worked on Democratic campaigns. I worked with Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. And I certainly had well-intentioned but contentious debates with friends of mine in the tech and business community who were very Republican, because what they saw in Mitt Romney, for instance, is a little more libertarian or conservative leader who would cut taxes, et cetera. And so, and I respected those debates. They were meaningful and they were thoughtful. And, again, for those other reasons I cited, I disagreed. But this time around, the guy we are running against is such a mess. He doesn't read. He doesn't study. He doesn't attract anyone around him to give him real advice. He can't have a conversation and listen. And as a result, that's why his policy and his behavior is so erratic. Nobody knows what to expect from this person, particularly on some of these complex issues that are ahead. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the job of being president is pretty damn boring. I've been lucky enough to be close to this president, to Barack Obama, and the guy reads all day long, right? Yes, there are fun moments where, I asked him once, have you had any pinch me moments? And he jokingly was like, no, never. He's like, I always grew up assuming I would sit at a baseball game in Cuba, watching two U.S. Major League Baseball teams play each other with Castro on one side of me and Derek Jeter on the other. He's like, I always assumed that would happen, just so he was joking. There were definitely these amazing pinch me moments. But the reality is most of it is hard work, hard decisions, lots of listening, lots of weighing advice, and making life or death decisions. And there's one person I'm confident has the temperament and the strength and the wisdom and the personality and the humility to do that. And so that said, one of the things that's real, though, is the fear I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley have about stepping up and actively, vocally supporting her. Mm-hmm. And I think, that was evidenced in this most recent debate where he made clear he would appoint a special prosecutor to investigate her. And he said just a couple lines later, if I were in charge, you'd be in jail. That's what happens in the developing world. As someone who's lived in, through coups in Latin America, that's what happens there. And I think a lot of my friends in business have been increasingly legitimately worried that there will be retribution for supporting Hillary in the event that Donald is elected. And so what I have seen is a lot more quiet support, where donations have been given at large scale, but to organizations that sign up new voters, for instance, to nonprofits like that, where they'll hopefully be having a democratic impact on the election, but without having to publicly identify as a Hillary supporter, because there's real fear.
That's good news. That's very insightful. And everything you just shared with your rationale and impact on tech and business and even, all the social issues. It's good to hear that there is even, maybe some things going on that people don't realize in terms of support, because it's been a little bit concerning to me to not see or hear more, either one way or the other, hopefully one way, but because of the amount of influence and the amount of power that a lot of the tech leaders have. And not only that, but the intelligence and the impact on our economy. So with that being said too, I'm hoping that the public office is more attractive to some of the tech leaders as well down the road, or you know, people that are thinking more progressively, because we need another crop of politicians, to come up and that think differently. And so that's a good thing to hear. But I was just curious kind of on the at large. And I know that we need to wrap this up, but for the future, Chris, is there anything that you've been thinking about doing that you haven't yet, or that maybe you're going to do soon that has been a why not now?
Yes. And I'm not going to tell you yet.
You're not? That's the whole show.
I know. That's how real it is that it's not up to me, but I think my family and I are going to do something really big really soon. It's something we've been working on for a while, and that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't kind of retired from the venture fund. And so I'm pretty excited.
Oh, that's exciting. And
but you'll know exactly when it happened.
And the dissection of how it happened, and you said you had to kind of take a step back in order to make this happen. So step back from other things. Anything else that was a moment that kind of triggered or propelled you forward, even though we can't talk about what it is, if you were to look at, oh, that's when we really greenlit this, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I'll say I've been more involved in this election than any election before, particularly financially. And my wife and I put 7 figures into this election, and that's 7 figures more than we planned to. And I think, one of the why not nows was I didn't want to have to look my daughters in the face later and explain to them that we could have done more to save America from this guy. And so that was a recent why not now. We're building a new climate initiative that we haven't talked about much. That again, there's an area of climate science called geoengineering that we just realized was being underfunded, and there wasn't a lot of attention being paid to it. And so we're building something around there that we'll announce. And it was just another one of those, like, we kept looking for other people's research, and we're like, well, if it's not here, we may as well do it ourselves. And so that's something big that we started. I think that's kind of been the nature of our life, is to, we have a place in Los Angeles where we moved to help raise our kids when we had 3 kids in under 5 years. And what was funny about that was we basically decided on a Monday that we should probably look for somewhere warmer than Truckee to raise kids in the first couple of years. And I think 9 days later, we owned a house in LA. So that's just how we roll. Is, as you pointed out, we're very lean. It's easy to give your venture fund away when there's only a couple people working there. It's easy to walk away from the business when there's only a couple people there. And you're gonna, hopefully, if things all come together, you're gonna see something big come from us soon that will be a large pivot from what we do for a living.
Wow, that's exciting. That is exciting, and I appreciate you sharing even that much. And not only that, but I have followed your path for a long time, and I have so much respect for everything you've done and the way that you do things, and truly honoring the why not now kind of vibe. But I can't thank you enough, Chris, for your time, and we will be following closely to see what this kind of unveiling is. And thank you.
Hey, thank you, and congrats on the new podcast. And hey, by the way, this is the lamest thing ever because I'm not a plugger, but everyone's got to watch Shark Tank on Friday nights on ABC.
Absolutely. I'll make sure.
I think I'm in a bunch of episodes this season. We didn't get to talk about Shark Tank, so we'll have to talk some other time about.
Yes, there are like 97 questions here, things that so maybe you can come back, but I will make sure we have people tune in, and I'm an avid watcher and love my Friday nights. So absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things on that. One is, I think my first episode is November 4th.
Okay.
They kind of determine them dynamically, but they like to put mine on during sweeps weeks because they get pretty exciting, because now there's somebody to finally fight with Cuban. And, and I would say the one thing that I've enjoyed doing is that during the West Coast feed of the show, I like to put on Periscope, and kind of do like a live viewing party of Shark Tank. So I basically give running commentary of the show while watching the show.
I love it.
And I think a lot of people have fun doing that. And so it's fun. You can obviously find my feed on Sacca on Twitter. I'm also Sacca on Snapchat, SACCA.
Awesome. That's great. I will make sure to follow too on Periscope when you're doing a live behind the scenes type of thing. So
there's a lot of fun stories to tell.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for that too. And hope to be in touch and stay in touch. It's been honestly an honor to talk to you. I'm all nerding out here. So
thanks for taking the time and congratulations again.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care. So there you have it, Chris Sacca. There were several times in that interview when I would say, okay, Chris, we got to start doing rapid fire round. We have to answer these questions quicker because I have so many more. So hopefully he will join us again down the road. You can follow him at Sacca on Twitter, and he's quite active. So make sure to also check out Shark Tank. It airs new episodes on Friday evenings, and Chris is a guest. What's cool about his situation is he likes to do live Periscope during the airings of the episodes that he's in. So you get to hear kind of what was going through his head. You get to hear this commentary that you wouldn't typically. So make sure you check him out on Shark Tank. So there's been a why not now I've been thinking about for quite a while of my own. And it's finally time to put it out there. And you may have seen it this last weekend. I actually posted on Instagram that I am going back to school. So this is a big deal. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. I have my undergrad degree from Arizona State University, which when I attended, it was the #1 party school in America, ranked by Playboy. So I've got that going for me. But I've been thinking a lot over the last year or so about going back to school. I love to learn. I love to be a student. I consider myself a student of life, that's for sure. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is how can I do this and still maintain everything else that I'm doing and find the time and a way to kind of customize my curriculum. And so I'm on that journey. I've enrolled in a few classes just to get my feet wet. But what I'm looking to do is creating a custom program that blends sociology with social communication, so social media, and cyber psychology. So really looking at the impact that the online world has on our offline world. And those two worlds have been colliding for a long time, the virtual world and the physical world. And I feel like I've really been living right in the middle of that because of what I've done with my company, what my kind of world has been. So I'm looking to learn more about the sociology side of things, but also the impact that this has on us. So I'm looking to learn more and be more valuable as I'm doing this research with various scientists studying the impact that the online world has on the offline and vice versa. But hopefully I'll be able to bring more to the table because right now I have a lot of that digital marketing, digital analytics, and kind of media side of things and discipline to bring to the conversation. And I'm looking to just offer more so I can make a bigger impact, be more valuable. And so that is what I'm super excited to announce. And this is a great excuse for me to get a Trapper Keeper again. You know, those Velcro cool folder things. Pretty excited about that. But stay tuned and I'll keep you posted on the journey. Right now, I'm in a lot of discovery phase, and hopefully some academic institution will take me. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/why not now. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard